Hey everybody, welcome to Astrology. We're going to talk a little bit about this lunar eclipse coming up on the 14th of March this month, the month of the Yin Earth Rabbit for 2025. And I actually haven't talked about eclipses so much on my channel. I guess there's a lot of people doing some pretty good justice on that, but I just wanted to talk about this one a little bit and the importance of eclipses, because I think eclipses always are going to reveal something to us that are well hidden in the chart, and I have a bit of a personal story to talk about in relation to it, which I think will make it probably, will just bring people attentions to studying their own natal chart and how an eclipse really affects your chart, because I think this is primarily really important, because we always need to know kind of what's hidden, how things are going to play out. And I think astrology is absolutely great for revealing these kind of things. But firstly, I just want to announce on my channel, I am going to do a live Chinese astrological webinar. It's called Chinese Astrology 101 webinar, coming up on the 12th of the 4th, 2025. It's on Saturday, 12:30 p.m. and that will be Australian Eastern Standard Time, because we'd be past daylight time by then, just for people who want to know, because I really want to do this because some people have contacted me in regards to Chinese astrology, and I thought it would be a good thing. So it's just a small webinar. It would go for an hour and a half. It's available on my website. We'll go through obviously your personal Bard-Zer chart, so all the participants, I'll go through people's Bard-Zer charts, so we'll give them a rundown of their Chinese astrology. We'll talk about the year of the snake, how it affects the charts. We'll talk about the 12 animal branches that are very well known in astrology, the heavenly stems. Also talk symbolic stars, and there'll be live Q&As, all this kind of thing. And I just want to really bring this out to everyone. So if you're interested, please visit my website, which is astropillars.com.au. I'll have the links below so people can enroll in that if they feel like they will need to or are interested in Chinese astrology, because it is a really cool subject and it's unique and it's a little bit different. So it's an opportunity for people to jump in and check this out. Okay, so enough of that. Let's get into the eclipse, because I had a personal experience coming up, and I want to share this with everyone, actually, because this is a very good reason why we should always study our own charts. So I had the up and coming eclipse in Virgo, right, which is at 23 degrees, which is an Aquarian degree. And funnily enough, because I've got a Taurus ascendant, so mine actually falls into the 5th house. And the reason I'm going to talk about this is because the eclipses, like I said before, reveal something that is hidden. So I actually had this eclipse fall, like I said, in my 5th house, but it was in a T-square, right? Well, it's coming up into a T-square. And between my moon in the 8th house, which is at 24 degrees, and my Mercury in the 2nd house at 23 degrees. So it's in a T-square between these two planets. And lo and behold, I was thinking, and we've got to bear in mind too, right? Sometimes eclipses can come in, and particularly lunar eclipses, and it's to do with timing and things like this, but I won't get into that. But sometimes the feeling or the effects can come in, sometimes a few months before. There can be activity around the actual date, but then it can happen, things can happen a few months after. But anyway, I was had a feeling I'd had some problems with my tax. And, well, not problems, but some things just weren't making sense to me when I've been doing my returns over the last few years or something. And so I looked at my chart and I thought, oh, I'm just going to check out how this eclipse is affecting my natal chart. And then, of course, I saw it in that position it was, in the 5th house, squaring the 8th in opposition to the 2nd. And I thought, wow, I really need to follow up on what is going on with the ATO. And in Australia, that's the Australian Tax Office, right? Some people like to call them the Gestapo, whatever. It's pretty much along those lines. But anyway, I digress. But getting back to this, so I thought, wow, this is really lunar eclipse, a T-square squaring my moon in the eighth house. I need to check out what the hell's going on with this. And lo and behold, I had a problem, whereas I didn't know that I was meant to be paying provisional tax, and lo and behold, I realized I ended up in a bit of a tax debt. And it was interesting because when I looked at the chart, as soon as I did and I saw where the eclipse fell, I thought, geez, I had to get on to ring my accountant. And I'm lucky I did at that point in time, because if I let things go, obviously, there's penalties and then there's interest and all this kind of thing, and you get stung, and it can really not go down well for your business, right? And make your life a lot more difficult. So that is what happened for me personally. And this is interesting how these kind of things can play out. So anyway, so we've got this eclipse coming up in Virgo, and it's in an earth sign, as we know, and Virgo is the sign, the archetype of the Virgin archetype. It has a lot to do with hygiene, health and service, and pets as well. And I think when we look at this kind of thing when it comes to Virgo, then we're going to be looking at, of course, there's going to be, of course, when in conjunction to a south node, which the lunar eclipse is, obviously, then we're going to have things to deal with. Karmic things can come up, right? Because the south node is about what we need to release and let go of. And so there can be a lot of things to do with those Virgo type issues, which can be due to overthinking, hygiene. I think it relates to a lot to psychology and psychic hygiene. It can be a lot to do with decluttering and clearing out what we don't need. And of course, I think the health side of things is extremely important, and particularly where it falls in our house, in particularly the chart of Australia, because I'm interested in this and I am about to do a talk on the chart of Australia on my channel. But like I was saying, the eclipse in earth signs, right, has a lot to do with, it can do, because eclipses tend to have a bit of a negative take on things. So it can have a lot to do with injury to crops, products, fruits of the earth, so to speak. The business world can be a little bit disturbed or depressed, and trade and agriculture and things like this can suffer, and particularly a lot to do with grains and crops, because this is what Virgo tends to rule. So, and I would say too, particularly with what's going on, and I think the political climate around the world, right? I mean, generally we've got unfortunate, it can be really unfortunate for government and statesmen, but I think that's really becoming apparent in Australia is drought, because we can be very drought prone. We're pretty much a desert. But what I've noticed over the last few years, I haven't had, this summer particularly has been extremely dry the last few months, and I think it's going to continue. I think we're coming up into a kind of drought season coming up. But I think all things when it comes to this kind of shedding with eclipses and bringing things that are eclipsed into our consciousness that haven't been made aware of tend to come up around these issues around the Virgin archetype. And I think a lot of Virgo type things is a lot of taking personal kind of responsibility for our own health and hygiene, and how we really look at ourselves and want to do these kind of cleansing type processes when it comes to the body. And I think this is really important, because Virgo tends to, it does rule the liver, pancreas, the bowel, the spleen. And the spleen is a very important organ to cultivate, actually. And this is really strongly emphasized in Chinese astrology, because the spleen is one of our energy producing factories, like the earth element, right? So I think, and obviously eclipses and lunar eclipses and the moon has a lot to do with how we absorb things and how we absorb nutrition. And so for those who really need to do maybe a liver cleanse and things like this around this time is not a bad idea. And you can either do that homeopathically or cell salt wise with like the cell salt Kali Sulf, which rules the sign of Virgo, which is phenomenal for clearing out the liver. really, really important. But yeah, so I think this kind of thing, right, in this Virgo, and it's interesting this eclipse coming up in Virgo, particularly with what's been going on in America with RFK and this. There's been this real emphasis, and I think this has been brewing up because I think the last eclipse we had in Virgo was about 9 years ago. But there's been this really strong emphasis on food and health and how the food, these big corporate companies are affecting. With really all genetically modified and things like this are really coming out into the public eye now. There's this real emphasis on this health and hygiene, which is in my opinion, long overdue. But I mean, I'll take it. At least all this kind of stuff is coming out into the open. There's this lot of, and I think this total lunar eclipse in Virgo is really stimulating this, which is, I think, a great thing. It's putting a lot of emphasis and personal responsibility on how we take charge of our health. And obviously, because it's in the sign of Virgo, the opposite of that is Pisces. And Pisces has a lot to do with mental health, right? So there's this strong emphasis on all this actually coming up. Mental health issues are on the rise, no doubt, as Wilhelm Reich said, and the psychologist Thomas Saz, who wrote the myth of mental illness, right? Which is, I highly recommend people reading that book, actually. Because there's a very interesting take on that. But Wilhelm Reich would call all kind of mental health, mental illness problems a lot to do with the emotion. He coined the term emotional plague, because if we don't process the emotion, then of course it deranges our psyche. But Pisces, being the opposite sign of Virgo, has a strong effect on our psyches as well. So there can be a lot of emphasis. Issues can come up around the influence of hospitals, immigrants, the poor, homeless. When homelessness coming up in Australia now is just come to the next level since this last 4 years of what's gone on. And then we've got, it can affect the wildlife, animals. Animal issues can really come up. And of course, it's going to affect the opposite sign as well. So elements to do with ocean life, oceans, oils, the oil trade, so to speak, psych wards, old age homes, ashrams, all 12th house type stuff, which are kind of ruled by Pisces, will come up. So, it's, I personally think this eclipse has a lot to do with paying attention to our own health choices, which is really playing out in that whole political world at the moment. A lot of emphasis on health. But we need to work out, as usual, the most important way is taking responsibility for our own health and not listening to a lot of the noise out there. Go see good naturopaths, acupuncturists, Chinese medicine practitioners, learn how to eat, learn how about diet, how to, really pay attention to the detail of this, because the lunar eclipse in Virgo is that attention to analysis. Nitpicking. The negative side of that can be neurosis and overthinking, and trying to perfect everything. That saying is, don't sweat the small stuff kind of thing. Don't overthink things to the form that we get neurosis and things like this. But I think this Aquarian degree on top of that is going to really emphasize a lot to do with tech. Definitely a lot to do with tech, because Aquarius rules these kind of things, systems, things like this, changing schedules. And this is a lot to do with that trine to Uranus. So there can be this little disruption in that. We can expect the unexpected, actually, when it comes to technologies and technological innovations, which I talked about a little bit in when Aquarius is ingressing into Gemini, which I think is a really good thing in a way, because it's going to stimulate people to use their cognitive function extremely differently. And I think that is what is actually really needed at the moment. But I think really, being an Aussie and looking at the chart of Australia, I had a quick look at the chart But I'm going to do a separate video on the chart of Australia and what's going on, because I think it's really valuable to know this. But I just thought, well, like in my chart, my personal natal chart, the eclipse for Australia actually falls into the 5th house, which has a lot to do with obviously theatre, the arts, amusements, places of entertainment, and things like this. It also rules obviously the heart and the heart issues, right? Because this has a lot to do with the 5th house. And the 5th house has a lot to do with children, schools, and birth rates. And I think what's really going to become aware out of this chart, and particularly for our country, is heart issues to do with youth and children are really going to come out into the public eye because of this eclipse, which obviously people who are quite informed about what's going on in the last 4 years or so have noticed this. I've talked with many colleagues and practitioners around this as well. But in Australia too, there's also this federal election coming up, and which I think is, there's something coming up because this moon's in opposition to Saturn in the 8th house in the chart of Australia, I think, which can indicate delays of some kind. So I'm wondering what's going to happen around this election. Are we going to have a by-election? Is something going to happen? It's squaring Jupiter in the 8th house. So, which in actual fact is not a good thing, because I've noticed, talking about my ATO debt and tax, there's going to be, I think, major increases in taxation in our country if we can't have any more at the moment. Well, I think they're going to try and pull off a little more, which is crippling a lot of Aussies at the moment. But there could be critical and difficult changes affecting the financial affairs of this country was going to be brought about to people's attention, and this is going to happen from this. It's almost like a T-square in a way. Jupiter's T-squaring this aspect between Saturn and the moon in the house. But I'm going to talk about this in the chart when I do the chart of Australia, which will be coming up. So, and the moon actually, from a mundane point of view, in opposition to Saturn, can really affect unemployment in the country as well. And obviously, the things can come up, which hopefully which will, shock and embarrass the government as well. This is what I've noticed, but I'm going to go into more detail into this in a separate video when I do my homework a little bit better, because our chart as a country is really coming into major transformation with Pluto right on the midheaven or the 10th house of this country. So there's huge transformation going on within Australia at the moment. But I just wanted to share a little bit about this, and hopefully wherever this is hitting in people's charts, hopefully people can write it out really well, and it's not really triggering too many deep-seated emotions, and if they are, and people are suffering or not able to cope with this, then really just do your best to go out and seek really good sources of help, that being good practitioners that can really help support and help you process the emotion, and really do your psychological homework on that, and really try and process it as best you can, because eclipses can be rough rides. And it's an interesting time at the moment. But I'm going to follow this up with a chart with my country of Australia and talk about this a little bit more. And I hope, for people who are really interested in the Chinese astrology, jump in on the webinar and just jump onto my website, because it'll be a good opportunity to really get involved and help try and understand your 4 pillars Chinese astrological chart. And I will see you guys very soon. Thanks for listening, and thanks to all the new subscribers. I appreciate it.